Hey guys, and welcome to another episode. Today I'm going to show you how to install outer tie rods on your car. Now this procedure is very similar for almost every single car out on the road, so this is going to be very handy for you if you're going to be replacing yours. How do you know when you need to change them? Well, it's actually very easy. So the way that you can tell is you have to get your car jacked up in the air so the wheel can not only spin freely, but you can move it from left to right. So your tie rod ends, essentially, they control the steering of the car. So they control the wheel going left to right, and it changes the direction. So with that being said, you should be able to tell if the car needs a new outer tie rod or even inner tie rod for that matter by getting the car in the air, getting your hands on both the left and right side of the tire, and see if there's any play. Can you see how it moves? So if there's a lot of play in the steering system, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to replace the parts with new ones so that when you come here and you try to turn and push on the wheel, there's no play whatsoever.
So to get access to the tie rod end, we need to remove the wheels. Remove each of the lug nuts that are holding it on to expose the important mechanical parts that are behind it. This outer part is the piece that we're going to be replacing. I've got my new tie rod end right here along with a new nut, cotter pin, and castle nut that we're going to install.
So here's the game plan. We have to take this old tie rod end out and replace it with this new one. However, the thing is you have to make sure that the distance that it is on the arm back here stays exactly where it is so your alignment is straight. If you spin the nut that's on the back side of here, when you go and tighten this back on, this is gonna give you an improper reading. So the game plan is we're gonna loosen this a tiny bit just so there's no pressure against the outer tie rod end. We're gonna take out the nut on the bottom, punch this out, unscrew it, replace it, and then put it all back together. That's the nut that I'm talking about. You have to make sure that you don't slide it in further in or out.
So the first step is going to be removing the cotter pin that's found at the bottom of the tie rod end so we can take out the castle nut. Now it's fed from one side through the other and it needs to be removed. So straighten it out with a set of pliers until you can pull it through from the other side. After that, we need to remove the castle nut with an 18mm socket and an impact gun so we can push the bolt from the ball joint out through the backside of the knuckle. Now there's two ways that you can remove the ball joint at this point. You can either turn the castle nut upside down, thread it back onto the ball joint, and then start hitting it with the hammer until it comes out. But if that doesn't work, if you have a ball joint separator, you can use that here. Now there's many different types. This one is going to be attaching itself to the knuckle and be pushing the ball joint from the bottom up. And at that point, it's going to be pushing it right out of the socket. You're not going to be damaging any of the threads, and you won't even need a hammer to get this done. Once you have it fitted to the tie rod end, if you want, you can use an impact gun to push it out until it comes right out of the knuckle. With the tie rod end now loose, put it back into the knuckle just so that we can spin the bolt that's holding it in place. Grab a wrench and loosen it off a little bit on the back side of the arm so we can then remove the tie rod end itself. You just want to spin it enough so that there isn't any pressure on the tie rod arm. Take the tie rod end out of the knuckle. You can then go ahead and spin the tie rod end while leaving the bolt intact. Now the bolt that's on the back side of the arm, make sure you don't move it anymore. This is very important in keeping your alignment straight so that when you put the new tie rod end back on, you're not going to have any incorrect alignment issues. Before you install the new arm on the car, you want to make sure that the old arm is the same length and size as the new one. And the reason why this is so important is that when you install this on the car, say the new one is a couple millimeters longer than the old one, this is going to throw off your steering alignments and everything, and it's going to be off. This means that you're definitely going to need an alignment afterwards because your steering wheel might not be straight when you're driving down the road. Now that we know that our new tie rod is the exact same thing as the old one, we can now install it on the car. Now when you buy the new one, it should come with a new bolt. If it's a different size than the original one that's on the car right now, you might throw off your alignment. So unless the bolt that's on the arm is physically broken, get that new bolt and throw it away. Spin the tie rod end onto the arm all the way until the point that it's going to be touching the nut. Once you get it to that point, you're going to then back it off a little bit just so that the tie rod end is going to be facing down and we can feed it through the back side of the knuckle. Then grab your new castle nut that came with the tie rod end and install it on the bottom side of the threads. Now make sure that the castle part, like the little crown part, is facing down so you have room to feed the cotter pin through the bolt. Once you have it tightened up by hand, go ahead and tighten it up a little bit more just so that it won't move and it's installed and secure. You can now grab your cotter pin and feed it through the bottom side. Now make sure that when you're installing it, you feed it all the way through and then you split both ends of the cotter pin around the nut on the bottom. This will make sure that the cotter pin won't slide out due to regular driving or any vibrations that are going to be pulsed through the car. Once the cotter pin and the bolt on the bottom are snugged in, grab your wrench and tighten up the nut onto the back side of the tie rod end. This is going to make sure that it's all snug and the steering isn't going to adjust when you drive. After that, we need to pump some grease into the tie rod end only so it can turn and function properly when we're driving. So when you buy it, it comes with a tiny bit of grease inside there, but there's not enough for actual driving use. So get a grease gun and pump a little bit of grease through the nipple on top of the tie rod end. Right now we have the proper amount of grease inside the ball joint only so that it'll function properly and it's not too swollen. If you take a look at it now, when you put too much grease in there, you can see that it gets swollen. Now that's something that you don't want because it can fail prematurely if you put too much grease in. So at the top, inside the nipple, there's a little ball. If you push that down, some of the grease will release and come out of the top. You don't want too much grease in there. You just want enough so the metal internals don't get metal on metal contact. You can then put the wheels back on the car and lower it down onto the ground. Now you have to get an alignment after this is done only if you want to keep your tires in good condition. Because we changed the tie rod ends on both sides of the car, the toe is going to be affected on both sides. So that means that you have to get an alignment in order to make those angles perfect again. If you want to see if you have any steering play, don't put the car back down on the ground yet. Go to each of the wheels and see if you have any play from left to right. Now after this is all said and done, they should be as tight as a drum and you shouldn't have any play in your steering system.
And by following those simple steps, you guys will be able to change your outer tie rods in a matter of no time. Now something to note is that if you guys are working with very rusted parts, your best friend is going to be heat. So if you have a torch, if you have a propane torch or anything like that, it's going to come in handy here. If you guys have any questions regarding the video, post your questions down in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Wait, so I shouldn't get a light and just flash it around everywhere?
I shouldn't stand in here with you?
You're famous. Now by following...
So, when's the lift going?
Yo, shut up.
No, it's fine.
No, shut up for a minute. I gotta record this and then I'm done.